Think about that exercise. We know the benefits long and short term. We know the long-term benefits of being around your family, of helping people, of having good, friendly relationships. What's the benefit of sugar? The long-term benefits of playing video games.
Right.
Obviously, the drugs and alcohol.
Instant scrolling.
Without the increase in serotonin, you learn it faster.
Yeah.
But they also are tending to be things you don't want to learn as fast.
This is Generation Health. We bring you the latest news, cutting-edge research, and time-tested best practices, helping you live a longer, healthier life. With me today, Joey DiMatteo, PharmD, board-certified clinical nutritionist. How are you?
Doing good today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very
Glad
good.
to hear that.
Yeah. And behind mic number 3, Josiah Schweinberg. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well.
Engineer extraordinaire.
Thanks for acknowledging me.
I do. I acknowledge and I approve of you.
I applaud you.
Wow.
I appraise you? No.
Sometimes I was hoping you wouldn't acknowledge me because then I wouldn't have to dump down the footage from this camera shot and this audio would make it go a lot faster.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I'm here.
We'll
I'm
just
here.
cut it out if we need to.
Perfect.
We love getting a visual on you, though.
Even when you don't hear him, he's still there.
I'm here.
We are going to answer a listener question. This one came to us from Catherine. Catherine said, I have 2 questions. First, I'd like to know about prebiotics. I recently saw an ad talking about a special prebiotic blend that feeds good bacteria in the gut and can even aid in fat loss by stopping hunger signals during a multi-week fast. What exactly are prebiotics, and can they really do all of that? Second, if I start taking a fiber supplement like your Clear Fiber Essentials, will it interfere with the work of my statin, Lipitor? Thanks for all you boys do. Getting health info we can trust. That's from Catherine. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, cool. 2 questions. Dante, what are prebiotics?
So over the years, I have heard many different attempts to define prebiotics. A lot of times you just get a short quip of, well, it's just fiber. It's all in foods. You don't have to worry about it, et cetera. So my hope here is just to give you one from a little bit more of the experts in the field.
Okay.
So the ISAPP, the International Scientific Association for Probiotics and Prebiotics. So they have a short consensus they made a consensus statement where they produce this short definition that can be helpful. So it's prebiotic is a substrate that is selectively utilized by host microorganisms, conferring a health benefit. And so a substrate, which is just referring to, the compound itself or a molecule in this case, that is selectively or specifically utilized or fermented in most cases by, again, specific microorganisms. So not something that's being broadly digested, but there's a certain substrate that then a certain species of bacteria, good bacteria in the gut, utilizes it, which then the final piece is it ultimately leads to a positive measurable health benefit. The last part being pretty straightforward. So it's not just merely this digestive process that occurs, but again, something that occurs, essentially think of it as food for our microbiome, in the gut, for instance, that has to then lead to something positive.
Okay, so I get that. So it's specifically something that selectively good bacteria are choosing over other bacteria. How do we know what good bacteria are versus bad bacteria? How do we know which one's which?
So definitely a big question,
Okay.
but I'll do my best to answer it, at least in the context of her question.
Okay.
So typically, good bacteria, so if you think of that, like some of their characteristics, I guess we'll start with, the good bacteria are those that are, breaking down foods that we eat. Sometimes there are enzymes that have a hard time digesting certain things. So these good types of bacteria aid in that process. Some of them serve to strengthen the immune system, as we've heard. So the benefits of good bacteria in the guts extend beyond just digestion. So specifically, they are often stimulating immune cells to be produced and kind of regulate this process, this inflammatory immune process that occurs. They also can compete or sort of displace bad bacteria. So it's sort of this fight for space in different areas of the body. That one pretty self-explanatory. Again, things that go beyond just the functions of the gut or the small intestines and large intestines, etc. But they can actually influence mood and brain function. So this is still an area of emerging research, but there's that link that specifically, again, ties the good types of bacteria to neurotransmitter production, like serotonin. Yeah, and can help maybe in some instances with mood disorders.
Okay, all right.
Now, as far as specific examples, if you look at the back of our probiotic essentials, that'll give you a good insight into how these strains are named. So I'm not going to bore everybody with the different species, but a couple of the big ones that people would recognize would be the bifidobacterium species, very common in the gut, lactobacillus, which most people have at least heard of. It's in things like yogurt or various fermented foods. And then the bad bacteria are kind of exactly how you would think of them. Those that are causing infections or have the potential to cause infections. They are, opportunistic in that way and can lead to a whole host of different issues. So these are the ones that we said were the good ones are aiding in the immune response, and they're aiding in different, production of neurotransmitters. These are doing quite the opposite. So they're interfering with nutrient absorption. They can cause, overactive or inappropriate immune responses. They can cause additionally, more intense inflammatory responses, if you will.
Sure.
And they're often challenging to treat. So as these bacteria mutate and sort of change, this is where we see antibiotic resistance occur. So these are things like, if you've heard somebody say they had strep throat, so strep is referring to a specific, species, staph infection. So, MRSA is an example, E. coli, Salmonella, C. diff or Clostridium difficile. So those are all the bad ones. So how do we ultimately know? I think over time, we've just seen through trial and error and through years and years of research, intervention studies, even that, what happens if we look at this strain versus that strain, or if we take this away, or we colonize somebody with this strain. And then over time, these outcomes or these associations emerge where maybe it led to an illness, or it led to, less of a certain illness. They can also be tested, obviously. So genomic sequencing, the DNA of the bacteria, that's like probably the most scientific way to sort of categorize these. So, the last maybe piece of your question, then we can move on. Yeah. I would say the way we were taught about different bacteria in school, whether it was just general biology or as we got into some more pathophysiology, physiology, we look at naming. So gram positive or gram negative bacteria, they can provide some insights or clues into how a bacteria acts or doesn't act, but that doesn't necessarily determine it being bad or good. There are certainly good and bad on both sides of the gram, those that are gram stained, and how we think of it in that way.
So it seems like to some degree, it's almost kind of like the difference between a plant and a weed is whether or not you want it.
Exactly.
And in most cases, most of the bacteria that we're talking about, it's do you want it in your gut or not?
Yep.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. So prebiotics are effectively the food that good bacteria selectively choose, that they prefer to eat that thing, whatever it might be. Okay. So what are some of those things? What are some of the prebiotics out there?
Yeah. So it's more of a classification. So if we look at some more of the specifics, we're talking about non-digestible fibers, basically, for example, that act as prebiotics. So if we look at the non-digestible fibers that have prebiotic characteristics, those are things like inulin That's a type of fructan or basically a chain of fructose molecules. This is common in things like asparagus, onions, garlic. Chicory root is the most rich source of this. This is where they extract inulin for supplemental purposes. And then there's a classification called FOS, or fructo-oligosaccharides, or oligofructose. And this is a shorter chain, similar to inulin, but not as many sugar units, found in some of the same foods, bananas being another huge one. Galacto-oligosaccharides, or GOSs, those are found in legumes, which are beans, lentils, chickpeas, for example, and then also human breast milk, or kind of a naturally occurring form, if you will, and then some other dairy products. This is often made for, also made in the context of supplements and sometimes used in infant formulas, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world that breast milk and infant formula would have that to help populate the gut of the baby. That's awesome.
And then there's also resistant starches. As the name implies, it's a type of starch that just resists digestion in the small intestine. And it reaches the large intestine where it's then fermented. Bananas or underripe bananas are a common...
I like underripe bananas.
That's fine. See, there you go.
See?
Prebiotics.
There you go. All right.
Cooked and cooled potatoes, pasta, rice. That's another common source. And also we think of whole grains as another instance of this. So oats, barley.
Pause you there for a second. You said, and then it's fermented in the large intestine. So the bacteria is literally fermenting the what do we say, resistant starches. And is that what's happening to all of these functionally?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
I know we sort of glossed over it. I know I gave kind of the succinct definition, but the easy way to understand it is that the prebiotic is literally just the food that you're supplying the good bacteria in the whatever context you're looking at. So
and the bacteria eating the food, that is fermentation, and that the byproducts are whatever might be the byproduct of a fermentation process.
Yeah, and we can talk about that eventually as well. So there are some different categories, which I'll just list. Pectins, which are soluble fibers found in cell walls of fruits. So makes sense. And you can start to, draw some common ground across these different categories. And the last one is polyphenols, actually. So they're not technically fibers, but again, they're plant compounds that are common in many of the fruits and vegetables that we've discussed. They're not fully absorbed, but then again, when they reach the colon or the large intestine, they are, eaten up and then fermented by the gut bacteria. And so this influences the growth of more good bacteria. So you just think of these as like the precursor molecules to the stuff that ultimately ends up, when you think of the benefits of good bacteria, this is kind of where that, starts more or less.
Okay. That's super cool. So there's a bunch of them. Like you said, there's a lot of overlap. It seems like it's fruit and vegetables. That's kind of the common ground for a lot of these. And not just the juice, but all the weird little bits that we don't think about all have a purpose in our gut.
Yep.
Very cool. Okay. All right. What's next? So that's what a prebiotic is. She said that she saw an ad about a prebiotic blend that feeds the good bacteria in the gut, which that seems definitional, and can even aid in fat loss by stopping hunger signals during a multi-week fast. That seems preposterous.
Yeah, that's a bold claim.
Yeah.
I would encourage her to take that with a grain of salt for sure.
Okay.
But it is certainly possible that, again, by consuming a diet higher in fiber, that you can curb your appetite to an extent that you maybe weren't used to. So those.
But if you're fasting for multiple weeks, you're not eating any fiber.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess that's what you would be supplementing with this, whatever this was. But anyway, okay.
Yeah. I don't know.
That seems.
Yeah, it would be helpful to know the specific product, but again, just for conversation's sake, I don't know that that's going to be all that it's cracked up to.
Yeah.
I think this is, there are instances where adding dietary fiber, or essentially if you just want to look at it as a prebiotic, that would be a good idea. For people who are pretty sure that they're eating a diet rich in whole foods and contain all the things and all the categories that we just mentioned, they generally don't have to worry about undershooting the recommended fiber amount. So that would be roughly 30, 40 grams a day.
Okay.
And if you're not really tracking this or reading food labels, is a little nebulous, of course, but you think of somebody who's eating fruit and vegetables 3 and 4 meals a day. They have whole grains. Maybe they eat oatmeal. Usually you can hit that number. Now, if you're somebody who's just, maybe just starting to try and eat a little bit more of a health promoting diet, and you're lacking in some of those categories, adding some fiber temporarily, you could certainly do worse things. I know we carry a fiber product. It's not for everybody, but it could be useful in that instance. And for example, the clear fiber that we have is the partially hydrolyzed guar gum, which serves again as a prebiotic fiber. So it does all the things that we just talked about. It just essentially turns this into some good food for the and additional things
for
of
the
course,
bacteria.
But for the bacteria found in the in the gut.
Okay, so you said we started all of this, and you said prebiotics are not just fiber, but conversationally, it seems like ultimately it kind of boils down to, for the most part, we're just talking about fiber. Would it be fair to say that it's not technically true, but it's functionally true for just average conversation?
I think that's
for most
fair.
people.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, all right, very cool. Okay, so the second half of the question, it seems like maybe she got a little ahead of us there. She said, if I start a fiber supplement like your Clear Fiber Essentials, will it interfere with the work of my statin Lipitor?
So I did take a different maybe spin on this question, and we can unpack it a little more, but she would be maybe a good example of somebody who could stand to benefit from fiber via supplementation. We do know that adding a fiber supplement or simply adding fiber in the diet, even if you're on a statin, can further reduce your LDL cholesterol, which is a good thing. So I would encourage her not to worry about the interaction, but that there's actually a potential for benefit and additional cholesterol lowering. And again, we'll just pretend that she's somebody who just maybe is a little less apt to eat tons of the prebiotic containing foods that we talked about. So adding something like this, I wouldn't be surprised if she saw maybe a little bit of an added benefit to her cholesterol numbers.
And you're not talking about a huge benefit, nothing like a statin itself would do, but some sort of lowering, assuming it's all stable.
Yeah. I don't have the direct research in front of me, but it just kind of depends on the person. But if you are somebody that can tolerate high amounts of fiber in the diet, if you basically work your way up and you also stand to benefit in lowering your cholesterol, you can get some pretty meaningful cholesterol lowering. Now, is it going to be can it definitely replace, rosuvastatin 20 milligrams at this point? I can't sit here and say that.
Sure.
But if you are somebody who, again, stands to benefit and you really want to pull the lever that affects the, cholesterol the most, in addition to reducing saturated fats in the diet, doing something like crushing fiber or adding a fiber supplement, it can certainly move the needle. And then, in addition to that, I will mention, if you are going to do that, or if you have done that, there can be a bit of a, tolerance building phase.
Sure.
So if you go from eating, if you have a diet that's largely processed foods, you're not eating a ton of prebiotic containing foods or minimally processed foods, you increase that. It's certainly possible that you end up with gas, bloating, those sorts of issues, which are not surprising. But if you give it time to sort of adapt, and maybe you find a kind of a middle ground there, it's just worth noting.
Very cool.
And again, the same can occur if you're adding tons of fiber to your diet. So if you're somebody, again, who hasn't been eating a ton of fibrous foods, all of a sudden you start eating 200 grams of cooked veggies every meal.
Yep.
And you wonder why maybe your stomach's a little off. That might be one area to look at. It can definitely happen.
Makes sense.
Especially for those who are, really, really overachievers and jump right into the food prepping stuff. So
I don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now that we've answered Catherine's question predominantly here, I want to circle back for a second. Because probiotics are a pretty new term, all things considered in the general conversation. Prebiotic feels like it's a new thing. I am only just now hearing, and it almost sounds like a Me Too kind of, I'm coming along too idea. And I've heard now postbiotic as well, which makes no sense to me. What exactly is the process? You're talking about the prebiotic is the food for the probiotic, which is the good bacteria to eat or ferment. What happens after that? Is there anything beyond that we need to know about?
Yeah. So what we're thinking about here is the kind of the direct product of the fermentation, for example, that occurs in the gut, let's just say. So I've heard it, I've heard some big time YouTuber sort of people mention postbiotics.
Is that what they're talking about? Is the product of the fermentation?
Yes. And it's nothing fancy. They're essentially, it can be multiple things, but the big ones are essentially just short chain fatty acids. So really crucial for a plethora of things. And they're the molecules or the compounds that end up, kind of doing most of the work at that point. And these are things like butyrate, acetate, propionate. So again, those food type fibers are fermented and you end up with something like short chain fatty acids, peptides, or even shorter chains of amino acids, enzymes that end up downline doing different, taking part in various processes. There are vitamins, B vitamins, vitamin K, for example, amongst some other things. And so why do we care about these things? Again, because we're looking at the positive effect. What's the actual end result here? And so these short chain fatty acids like butyrate, for example, can actually help to bolster the cell lining in the colon, for example. So you've heard things like, how do we maintain the integrity of the intestinal barrier? Well, it's compounds like these that we often leave out when talking about them because we stop at probiotic or good bacteria or microbiota, but really there's this kind of after end product thing that maybe we just technically leave out,
Is it because in theory, if you're doing all of the steps leading up to it, eating a diet rich in fresh fruits and vegetables, and your probiotics are on lock, that in theory, all of these things should be taken care of themselves? Is that why we don't talk about it?
Exactly.
But now, it's not always the case, right?
Right. Now, in the same sense that people, in this question, she's asking about, well, basically, am I getting enough prebiotics? Should I add prebiotics via supplementation? What's the deal? There are probiotic, postbiotic sort of products now that are marketed as sort of a comprehensive, almost like a more comprehensive version of a product serving to help the gut microbiome, essentially.
Okay.
But I don't know enough about it at this point. But again, this is just more or less to say, hey, this is to say you have a postbiotic supplement. You could certainly put different forms of butyrate in there or propionate in there, like we mentioned. How well does that work? Don't know exactly, but also you might just see, again, things like I mentioned, different digestive enzymes, which can technically be a postbiotic because it was synthesized as a result of this fermentation process.
When you said vitamin K.
Exactly.
So that is something that we have in some of our supplements, but we don't call it a postbiotic. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So it really can make a big difference which ones we're talking about, whether or not it makes any sense at all to supplement it or why you're supplementing it. Okay.
Yeah. And so, and the other thing too, is it's tempting. And I think it's, worth continuing to talk about in this setting is because we know with probiotic supplementation, for example. And again, I just want to be clear, the good bacteria that's already present sort of naturally in the gut, don't really think of as probiotic, but probiotic is more of the categorization of the supplements, whether that's in food or supplementation in food, for example, that you can add after the fact. You know what I'm saying? So if we're being technical with all the terms we've thrown out, I guess it's worth mentioning. But another, again, reason why I think postbiotic is being thrown around more is because of how difficult it is at times to keep probiotic strains shelf stable. So it's the whole, does it need refrigerated? Are they freeze dried? What's the deal? What's the shelf stability?
Right.
There's a whole host of, things that we've talked about in the past in regards to our product specifically, but how temperamental really these strains are, because they're literally live microorganisms. And so when you think of a postbiotic, it is a non-living thing at this point. It's it's an enzyme, or it's a short chain fatty acid, or it's this product, again, as a result of a natural process that has already occurred. So just it's worth it in that.
Yeah. Much more stable of a
you can logically, it makes sense as to why you would consider supplement. Why would I give somebody the thing that needs converted when I can just give them the final converted thing? That sort of chain of thinking.
Yep.
Right now, again, I just don't know how. It's often not that simple.
Not that easy. Yeah, of course.
So
I've seen prebiotic sodas. Is there any value to that you're aware of?
I think they're really good tasting.
Fair enough.
I consume them not necessarily for like these added health benefits. I suppose it's not the end of the world to get a few extra grams of fiber.
Sure.
In essence. But again, in the context of somebody's dietary pattern, it's the question of maybe what is that person replacing? And if adding in some of this, functional stuff from the functional beverage market, like Poppy, then we can say that, it probably beats a sugar sweetened beverage, possibly.
I mean, case in point, the sugar sweetened beverage is going to feed the bad bacteria because we know they prefer that. And a prebiotic soda would theoretically feed the good bacteria. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, you're going to get a few grams of fiber. I think that it's maybe you have some stevia as again opposed to the regular sugar. There's still going to be some calories, 20, 30, 40 calories, again, which pales in comparison to what you would commonly think to be found in a can of soda. Sometimes they'll throw things in like apple cider vinegar, which can also, some people maybe help digestion. That's maybe a stretch.
Okay.
But I mentioned that too, because you can often taste some of that.
Yeah, you can taste it in there.
And the same thing goes with these sort of beverages. When you think about somebody adding tons of fiber to their diet that wasn't otherwise doing so, maybe you have some of those bloating, gas-like side effects, symptoms, as if you had like a minor version of IBS.
Sure.
So you would want to watch that. There are specific ingredients sometimes.
So if you dive in with both feet,
yeah,
you might find yourself a little uncomfortable for a bit.
Yeah.
But theoretically, stick with it and you should be good to go in not too long.
I think so.
We are going to talk about, this is a super cool article. Nerd alert. If you're into serotonin and dopamine, this one's for you. It is definitely for the two of us because we find this stuff fascinating. This is an article from SciPost. It says, a recent study from Stanford's Wu Tsai Neurosciences Institute has shed light on the interplay between two key brain chemicals, dopamine and serotonin, revealing their opposing roles in shaping our decisions and learning processes. Published in Nature, that's a journal, the research demonstrates for the first time that dopamine and serotonin operate as a, quote, gas and brake, unquote, system, jointly influencing how we learn from rewards. The findings have broad implications from understanding everyday decision-making to developing treatment for neurological and psychiatric conditions such as addiction, depression, and Parkinson's disease. It says two competing theories have sought to explain their dynamic, that being the dynamic of serotonin and dopamine. The synergy hypothesis, which posits that dopamine focuses on immediate rewards and serotonin on long-term benefits, and the Opponency hypothesis, suggesting that the two act in opposition, with dopamine encouraging impulsive action and serotonin promoting restraint. Stanford researchers aimed to directly test these theories using advanced experimental methods. All right, before we go any further, that's the setup. Joey, what is dopamine? What is serotonin? Help me, remedial base level.
I was going to say, yeah, at the basic level, they're both associated with they're called happy hormones.
Okay.
Couple of things I liked. Dopamine more associated with wants. Serotonin more associated with likes and loves.
Okay.
Dopamine, really known as the reward chemical, back to the wants. Quick reaction to stimuli. The link to addiction, drugs, alcohol, but also sugar, shopping, spending money, gambling, social media scrolling, video games. The types of things, some are inherently bad, you could say, certainly, but not necessarily things that are inherently bad, okay? But it's the reward hormone, drives motivation, drives pleasure. Excess dopamine, again, can lead to impulsivity, addiction. Addictive drugs and alcohol can lead to dopamine surges 10 times a natural stimuli. So when you look at the difference between a drug and alcohol versus, I shop and spend money and I go on my phone and I play video games, that's just, you're playing with fire with one more than the other. But
it's literally the same, your brain is operating on the same circuitry, whether you're taking the drug or you are addictively engaging in some other form of behavior.
But the 10x surge is what creates the percentages of addiction, and why some people do those other things no problem, why some people have a candy bar and don't think about, reaching for a candy bar every time. But that also goes into the habits of what you form in your brain and all the individual response.
Yep.
Serotonin more associated with longer term thinking, patience. Again, your likes and loves, a little maybe more depth, you could say. Not as easily hijacked by drugs, by sugar, by social media. It's a mood stabilizer, calmness, focus, well-being. That's the target of SSRIs, antidepressants. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So dopamine dumps, serotonin does not. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct. And certain drugs in particular, but all drugs, in one way or another, have a link to dopamine. Okay. Something like cocaine has a direct dump. Other drugs are more just, the reward of when I take this, I feel good right away, and the association there.
Makes sense. All right. The synergy hypothesis and opponency hypothesis. Those are pretty dramatically different perspectives, it seems like. Why do we have such different views on it? Yeah.
So I guess what they're trying to determine, we know dopamine is kind of the short-term immediate rewards, and we have also seen that serotonin may be a little more long-term association, but are they just working together and this is short and long, or is there some opposition where dopamine is this impulsive part of your brain and neurotransmitter, and serotonin is restraint?
Yeah.
So I don't know that it necessarily has to be one or the other.
Sure.
But I think whenever you are trying to design your lifestyle and you're trying to look at drug design and what can we do to these neurotransmitters, the more that you understand them and their interplay with each other, the more that you can get end result benefit from that research.
That makes a lot of sense. So what did they find? What did they do? I guess maybe that's the better question. What did they do?
So I think what they use mice, of course. They use something called optogenics. And that's why this is pretty cutting edge in the sense of the technology wouldn't exist to do a study like this, but
it's why we've literally never been able to test this before.
Exactly. So optogenics, they basically genetically modify part of the brain of these mice, and the optogenics component allows them to manipulate the neurotransmitters. So they're not only evaluating the neurotransmitters, but they can induce elevated or decreased states of serotonin and dopamine via light. Wow. That's the opta part of optogenics.
Whoa, okay. Yeah, I can see why they didn't test this on humans.
Yeah.
All right.
So what they found, and it wasn't, so they looked at reward, the traditional give it sugar kind of thing. Mm-hmm. They also looked at avoidance of, so that's where then some of the, what's the real, is it the opposition theory or So dopamine also is linked to avoiding uncomfortable situations, avoiding, they use kind of like a shock.
Yeah.
To avoiding that. So I thought that was interesting. But I think what, the main kind of one-liner is that they found that dopamine and serotonin activity shifted in opposite directions. Dopamine increased with reward signals, and serotonin decreased. So this leans more in favor of supporting the opponent hypothesis.
Okay. All right.
So I guess, one of those things, you can kind of nerd out a little bit and you're understanding a little more about these things, but I still try, doing a video here. What can you take from it?
Yeah.
And so I looked at, okay, so if you give a mice or human sugar, you can deduce from the mice study that dopamine's going to go up. We know that, but what we kind of didn't know is what happens to serotonin. So with something like that, just an external stimuli, serotonin goes down. That reinforces the learning. So what they did then was they raised both of them, using the optogenics, and the reward learning in the mice was slower than whenever it went where dopamine goes up and serotonin goes down.
It had a harder time learning.
Yes. So the learning of the rewards is associated with a decrease in serotonin and an increase in dopamine. Okay. So what I thought was, I'm just going to look at what happens when you exercise. What happens whenever you have whenever you're spending time with your family and have good social interactions, you help somebody out. Those types of interactions, all exercise, positive social interactions, raise both. So again, this is where I thought it was very interesting. So something like exercise raises your dopamine, you feel good, has long-term benefits, kind of the wants versus the likes and loves, the longer-term kind of focus of serotonin and effect of serotonin, it raises both. So traditionally, is exercise is quote unquote addicting, even as a video game or something? No. And I thought that was interesting because that kind of decreases the likelihood that the reward aspect is learned. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So a video game is going to give you that immediate dump and the disproportionate effect of dopamine over serotonin versus something like exercise that requires protracted focus.
Yes. You're going to learn the reward of even though you feel better in the moment and then the serotonin's on board, you maybe feel better a little longer. It takes longer for you to learn that. It takes longer for your brain, just in the most kind of fundamental sense, to learn that because of what they've shown here, that it's that opposite, whenever they're in opposites, where the reward is learned almost instantly. So even whenever you think about that exercise, we know the benefits long and short term. We know the long-term benefits of being around your family, of helping people, of having good, friendly relationships. What's the benefit of sugar? Benefit of the long-term benefits of playing video games. Not bad things.
Right.
Obviously, the drugs and alcohol. So when you look at what those things can that reward signal,
social media, instant scrolling,
without the increase in serotonin, you learn it faster.
Yeah,
but they also are tending to be things you don't want to learn as fast. And the things that you want to learn, I want to work out for the next 3 days and love it.
Yeah. If only.
And yes, there's other things at play. It takes physical effort. You may be sore. Obviously this is not to boil it down to this being the only thing, but when you look at the process of, I would just assume, if it elevates dopamine and serotonin, it's going to be more of a reward signal. And it shows you the way the brain works, that whenever they're both elevated again, that they induced in the mice, that occurs during the exercise positive social interaction, that the learning effect is lessened. Takes longer to learn, slower to learn.
So it's almost, a gas and brake pedal being an apt analogy. It's almost like pressing down on the gas while also holding down the brakes to some extent. You might move, but you're going to move slower.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay. Now I understand why they chose that analogy.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yeah, kind of that the difference locks it into your brain more. You know what I mean? And I think that's whereas the other thing, again, like I'm saying in a different way, but it's just going to take more time for you to realize those benefits of exercise, of being around your family. That you're not typically going to feel the hit that you would, just the pure kind of pleasure effect that comes with with dopamine.
Yeah.
And then that drop in serotonin helps to add something, kind of a layer of why it occurs.
So if I'm pulling this into modern day life, which these systems in our brain doesn't seem like they were really designed to compete with social media and cocaine. Like those are a problem. If I want to learn to love exercise, or I want to learn to love something that requires effort and time, playing an instrument, there may be, an instrument's probably a good example. There's a little bit of dopamine when you finally play the note correctly.
Absolutely.
But it takes a lot of effort to get to that point to be able to have that big dopamine dump. For the most part, it's the slow grind. So if I need to, or if I want to engage in some sort of long-term behavior that will improve my life, that's why figuring out how to gamify it, for lack of another term, has a better success rate. Whether it's just setting a small micro goal and hitting it so that you can get that dopamine hit, or using, I remember it was Couch to 5K was an app that was popular for a minute, like figuring out different ways to turn the boring, slow reward into an immediate dump will increase the rapidity with which you gain the pleasure and the fun.
And you will eventually, again, soreness aside, etc.
Yeah.
And with the family and pause, because I thought that was really interesting too, that parallel between those two. Yes, they're still gonna, I love being with my kids, but there's still going to be the downside of that at times.
Yes.
But I think the point is that the more that you reinforce that behavior, the more that you do it, the more it becomes natural to you, the more that your brain learns it's a reward. And then from there, you get the longer term kind of serotonin effect of it. More kind of on the clinical end of when you're looking at depression, you're looking at addiction, those things that are related so directly to serotonin and dopamine, that instead of just designing a drug around the serotonin and kind of avoiding dopamine or vice versa, that now hopefully, if they can prove this out more and start to get involved in humans, et cetera, that they can design, when it's warranted and needed.
Right.
Because what's hard to do whenever you're depressed? Be around your family.
Yeah.
Get up and exercise. Be motivated to go out and see your friends and go to dinner with your buddy. Those things do start to fall away when there's depression, when there's low serotonin.
Wow.
And then what do you crave?
Yes.
What's very easy, what's going to make you feel really good? Sitting at home, throwing on Netflix, sitting at home, playing my video games, sitting at home, scrolling on my phone. So it kind of like, well, ultimately you're saying like, do stuff that's good for you. And eventually I get it, but adding a little bit of concrete at the bottom, a little bit of foundation of what's actually happening in your brain, maybe why you're not reacting to it exactly as you hoped, those kind of things. I think for me anyway, helps me to get something out of it.
Well, and if nothing else, we aren't animals. We don't respond strictly to the stimuli. So hopefully, if you know what's going on, maybe at some level, you can just go, you know what? I'm not getting the reward right now, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. I know this is good for me in the long term. This is the thing I'm going to do. Or I'm feeling down and I'm feeling blue. I know that's because of low serotonin. So maybe I need a medication, maybe not. Maybe what I need to do is engage in some activities that are going to, in the longer run, give me more of the thing that I'm missing.
Yes, exactly. And then you're exactly right, but look at the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So when you're feeling a little down, when you're not feeling great, and you know that you can pull up your phone, even if you don't really know why it makes you feel better, it does. Or maybe you run over to the pantry and it's not the refrigerator for fruit, it's for candy. Those things, even putting just a little more concrete around it of why maybe we do try to limit those things. I know it's a big thing now, the dopamine detox and all that.
Yep.
And even though that kind of goes to maybe one extreme, I think the point is still foundationally solid in that, when you keep reinforcing to your brain these things that are more addictive, more easily giving you pleasure, but that now we're learning, and even kind of intuitively already knew, that don't have any medium or long-term benefits. When you keep feeding short-term, and you're going from one short-term to another, you're going from the video game to your phone to the pantry, how maybe limiting that in your life as much as you can, realistically speaking, can help to not continue to perpetuate that vicious cycle.
And now we don't have to talk about it, but that just triggered for me all the ADHD understandings and the dopamine addiction that we subconsciously engage in of trying to get that next hit. And that's why we end up doing all the things that we find immediately pleasurable and none of the things that we need to do for the long term.
Yes. And sometimes whenever it's such a black or white thing, like I'm supposed to be working, so I get at my phone. Okay. Like we understand. All right. But I think what I've even found is I've started to kind of be a little more aware of these kind of things is the simple difference of a movie. It's at night. Kids are asleep or whatever, work's done for the day. I put on a movie and I still have this draw to my phone. Because the movie is what? It's going to be a longer
2 hours.
2 hours. There may be parts you're not as into. You may not feel really impactful until an hour in or till the end of it. But the phone, I'm going to get something from. I'm not purposely doing it, but there's something telling me that even during this movie that I put on and I like movies and I want to watch it, that the phone is still a draw for me.
Wow.
So even in something that should be more comparable, like, well, they're both entertainment. So what if you have your phone instead of the movie? But my brain is functioning in that the shortest, quickest dopamine hit I can get is my phone. So yeah, this movie's cool, but let me grab this.
And that's why you should watch movies instead of TV shows or scrolling on your phone. That's what all this was to say.
There we go.
Watch our long form podcast. All right. That is fantastic. I'm really glad we covered this. I hope that was helpful to you. Josiah, you just made a move like you had something to say.
Nope.
Got it. Awesome. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
You bring so much to the conversation. That's it for us today. Thank you so much. If you would like more of this, go to our website, askjoedimatteo.com. That's askjoedimatteo.com. It's down there somewhere if you're watching. That website has all the past episodes of this show, the show that started all this, the Ask Joe DiMatteo show, as well as all the products that we sell, wonderful, fantastic supplements to help with your dopamine or serotonin levels or your protein needs or whatever other supplemental health need you might have. We got it there. AskJoeDiMatteo.com. If you have a question, email us questions at AskJoeDiMatteo.com. We'd love to hear them, or you can just drop a comment down below on this video. Any of the references we made will be available in the show notes. And I think that's it. Share this with somebody you know, somebody you like, somebody you love. Help them to learn the same things you're learning, and give it a thumbs up. That's it for us today. Have a good one, guys.